Hi guys. So this week we have new topic about Islamism or revival, the Islamic revival and political participation, and we will cover different forms of Islamic revival or Islamic movements, and we have the extreme form of the revolution in Iran, and then we can have like mild forms of Islamic revival in different countries this week. This will be in Thursday's lecture. So before we explain how the Iranian Revolution broke out or came about, so we need to take like a historical overview because we didn't talk much about Iran, and we need to know how the religious establishment of Shiism actually emerged and entrenched its autonomous position. And I'll hint at during the course of the revolution, we will hint at different events. So you need to avail yourself of these historical stories and historical overview first in order to understand how or to have like this genealogical approach to the Iranian Revolution. It was like one of the main political rival to the Ottoman Empire, as the Ottoman Empire emerged from this humble like tribal origins, if you remember, in Anatolia. So the Safavid Empire as well emanated from this humble tribal origins. It had like this Turkish and Kurdish origins that they established the entire empire to the east of the Ottoman one. So in the late 13th century, a member of the Safavid family founded the Sunni Sufi. So it emerged as a Sunni Sufi order, and then it was transformed into Shiism. So this is how we can explain, how Shiism gained kind of strong roots in the Iranian society. So it started as like Sufi order in Azerbaijan and from tribes from Azerbaijan and Turkish-speaking region especially of the northwestern Iran, and it actually attracted some Turkish tribes of different other areas and expanded until by the late 15th century. It expanded into Anatolia and Syria. So it emerged from like, as it was the case with the Ottoman Empire, with how it expanded actually its territorial domain. It expanded as well from this tribal raids and expedition against other tribes, and it expanded as well against Christians and that lived in the Caucasus. That was like to take like that was like depicted as kind of they served Islam by making this tribal raids and expedition in order to expand the Islamic territories or Islamic territorial domain. So it was until the 15th century when Ismail in 1494 he took over or succeeded his brother as the head of the Sufi order or the Brotherhood order, and transformed it into an imperial institution. So he managed to capture Tabriz and to proclaim, and he proclaimed himself as a Shah king, as a representative of the Safavid empire, and he actually transplanted or imported Shiism into Iran. Historians actually didn't have like any kind of consensus about the source of this Shia conviction. Some of them mentioned like Ismail like gained or acquired this Shia belief from one Shia leader that sheltered him. But regardless of the source of his belief, the source of Shiism, he became one of the fervent defender of Shiism, and he eradicated all the Sunni Sufi orders, and he ordered execution of population or individuals that rejected to adopt Shiism. So he founded actually or established. He was the origin where Shiism did strike roots in this area, in this territorial domain. And he adopted, this 12-verse Shiism. So he claimed kind of divinely inspired by imam, the seventh imam, and the Shah, or the king of the king of the kings. Actually, he had or claimed this earthly representation, or he was representative of the hidden imam, the 12th imam, that actually, according to them, um, he was hidden in a tunnel. And that's why religious establishment, or the Shah, or later ulama, claimed kind of representation of this imam, like in the absence of the hidden imam. So they had to practice ijtihad, or interpretation, in order to make sure the legal framework and all the laws and regulations conform to the Islamic Sharia, or the Islamic laws. As Shiism didn't have any roots or origins in this geographic area, so he actually exported, some ulama, or people embraced, Shiism from the Arab provinces, especially from Lebanon, in order to have this religious establishment, to transplant, this religious establishment in Iran. And he actually constructed or established, this extensive imperial institution by, again, establishing bureaucratic, apparatuses, or um, administrative institutions, and he created a class of civil servants in order to run the territorial domain. And the main threatening source had been other tribes or tribesmen. So that's why he had to neutralize and to weaken them by establishing his own military capacity and military forces. And he managed actually to establish, this bureaucratic and military apparatuses in order to entrench the power of the Safavid Empire. And for some historians, he established kind of bureaucratic despotism, or absolutist bureaucratic empire, that made it very difficult for any subsequent empires to replicate or to repeat the same, to have the same bureaucratic strength. So after his death, and his successors actually faced the same threatening force from tribesmen or tribal attacks. So occasionally they revolted against the central authority or the central government, in order to have the predominance, or to have their control over power. Especially after establishing these kind of bureaucratic or administrative structures, they created a new class of civil servants, and they excluded the leaders, the tribal leaders, from the civil administrations. So that's why they struggled for more power, to gain more authority over the lands. Because of this occasional rebellion from tribesmen, the Shah had to strengthen or to build the capacity of the military, and building the military capacity actually motivated the Shah in order to expand the territorial domain on the east and the western frontiers, and he managed to capture Baghdad, Iraq, including Baghdad. And he made he didn't invent Isfahan, but he made it as one, as a capital and cultural and commercial center in Iran. The situation remained the same with the declining of any kind of threatening force. So the Shah stopped spending money on the military in order to invest, the money in other sectors or domains, and this made the empire vulnerable to the attack of the different tribes. That actually they brought the Safavid Empire to an end in 1722, and this ushered in a period of instability and decentralization, and it remained the same until 1794, when a Turkish, tribesman again made an attack and gained control over Iran, and established another dynasty, called Qajar dynasty. in central Iran in 94. And it remained the same until 1920. So it, like Qajar dynasty remained or had been the ruling dynasty from the late 18th century until 1920. And as I mentioned, like no other dynasty had been able to replicate the same royal absolutism like the Safavid Empire had. So they had like to generate revenues in order to expand their territorial domain and in order to maintain their grip on power. So they didn't have any divine attributes, so they didn't like relate themselves to Shiism. But at that time, the religious establishment of Shiism like had gained its own autonomous position in order to fight, and they had to fight for their independent and autonomous position. That was actually emanated from this predominant and independent position, came from this practice, like claiming authority or representation of the heading imam. So they had to practice like ijtihad in order to legitimize like religious practices and to have like a different interpretation to different religious patterns. And believers in Shiism, they had to attach themselves to they call mujtahid, like the ulama, one of the category called mujtahideen. So the mujtahids, the believer had to attach himself to a mujtahid in order to accept, and they had to accept the mujtahid ruling in order to avoid certain like practices, or in order to enable the believer to behave in a certain way. And the mujtahid's rulings were like preferred to other existing ruling, including the royal authority or the royal decrees. So sometimes like ulama denounced the royal decrees or royal authority because like these kind of decrees or laws were incompatible with the Islamic teaching or Islamic Sharia. So, but by this time, although like the dynasty didn't have any kind of claim to Shiism, or didn't have like this religious attributes, but the dynasty hadn't been able to eliminate altogether the religious establishment that had already established or entrenched its position in Iran at that time. So they had to like the Shah had to build the army in order to maintain the existence of the Qajar dynasty, but the Shah or the dynasty didn't have like this kind of bureaucratic or administrative structure in order to endure or to maintain its to impose its predominant position over other social forces, most especially the ulama. So the ulama actually monopolized, the religious and educational sphere, and they had their own financial autonomy as well. So they had to collect zakah, and they had like all the waqf had been placed under their jurisdiction. So they had their own financial autonomy in order to, in the face of the dynasty. And they had like control over the educational sphere, so they had to legal. They had like the content or the educational curricula were kind of closely supervised by the ulama in order to make sure that Shiism had been like the main source of belief. So they didn't, unlike the Ottoman Empire, they didn't have, or Egypt, so they didn't have this Western modernization. So they didn't have this westernized bureaucratic structure and this westernized educational system that actually resulted in the emergence of new Western-oriented class that pushed for more political and modern reforms. But it didn't mean that the dynasty or the Iran, didn't witness any kind of European influence, especially with the Russian intervention. So Russia actually occupied some territories and absorbed Turkestan and Tajikistan and Caucasus into the Russian Empire, and it was very difficult for Russia to rule over this ethnically diverse territories that included Christians and Sunnis and Shias. So that's why they had to approach the Shah in order to have kind of commercial treaties in order to gain some of the commercial and economic concessions, similar to the capitulations under the Ottoman Empire that Britain and and France and other like European power enjoyed. So by approaching or developing these kind of commercial ties with the great powers or European powers, it actually undermined the position of the merchant class, or it actually affected negatively some economic interest inside Iran. Although like the volume of Iran's international commercial exchange hadn't reached the level like the Egypt or the Ottoman Empire with the other European forces, but again, like the imported manufactured goods and raw agricultural commodities actually made it very difficult for domestic forces or merchant class or domestic economic interest to compete successfully with the European interest. So that's why they started to develop, this resentful sentiments or feelings toward the Shah, and they started to vocalize, kind of opposition or to side with other forces, including ulama and like radical reformers against the economic policies of the Shah. And the very existence or the heavy existence of Russia inside Iran triggered or provoked Britain as well to gain the similar economic concessions. If you remember, Britain was interested in this area in order to secure its trade to India. So it had strategically, it had a strategic interest in positioning in Iran as well, and gaining kind of economic concessions from the Shah. So this actually gave rise to an outbreak of social unrest. The most prominent event was a tobacco protest of 1891, when the Shah decided to offer the economic concession to an English company to have exclusive right to produce and sell and export, the entire tobacco products. So that actually affected negatively the domestic interest, and this triggered provoked some economic interest in order to vocalize their opposition or protest against the Shah, including ulama. So the ulama actually led the protest, and they framed it within Islamic they had some Islamic elements in order to attract much more supporters, in order to encourage more protesters to join, or to transform this popular unrest into an open revolt against the Shah. And they actually managed to enforce the Shah to cancel the concessions 1 year after, in 1892. But if it proved something, it proved the important position or the important role of the religious establishment in provoking or stirring up the social unrest against the Shah, and their ability to frame these kind of economic demands and economic grievances, and to place these claims within Islamic frame, or using Islamic element in order to mobilize masses against the Shah. During the early like 20th century. It was the era of the young Turks in the Ottoman Empire. If you remember, like Western oriented elites, they took the lead on ushering in this far-reaching modernization programs in order to modernize the administration and the military establishment in the Ottoman Empire. So Iran like witnessed, some kind of social upheaval as well during that period, but unlike the Ottoman Empire, it witnessed like what was called a constitutional movement that represented an attack on the royal autocracy. So the constitutional movement actually it didn't emerge from the transformation of this bureaucratic elite or reform-oriented military officers. Uh, but it emerged, out of like awkward and loose coalition between ulama, traditional element in the coalition, and Bazaric merchants and radical reformers. Actually, they were conservative elements like the merchants and ulama, and it was a very small group of radical reformers that they asked for some political and constitutional revolution. So they got together because they had something in common, which was actually their opposition to the autocracy, the royal autocracy, on the one hand, and the economic and the heavy existence or the foreign exploitation of the economic resources in Iran. So they didn't have a common vision about what kind of political structure or constitutional revolution, what shape it had to take, but it had their the commonality, or they converged on their opposition to the royal autocracy and the heavy presence of Western and foreign interest in Iran. So again, like the repeat kind of repetitive pattern or theme, it was like this kind of increasing influence of Britain and Russia, and offering some concessions or economic concessions, and especially after the discovery of the oil, it was like oil concessions as well. And the misuse or the mismanagement of these financial resources led to some economic downturns or crises that pushed the country, as it happened in Egypt and the Ottoman Empire, to get loans from foreign creditors. In this case, in the case of Iran, the Shah had to reach out to Russia in order to get some foreign loans. So this triggered. Led to the outbreak of the social protest, led by constitutionalist figure with this kind of loose coalition between merchants, ulama, and radical reformers, and actually they managed to pressure the Shah in order to abide by the constitutional decree. According to this constitutional decree of 1906, it had two components. The first one, the fundamental law that decreased the power of the Shah and gave some authority, legislative authority, to the Majlis, or the National Assembly, over economic concessions, treaties, foreign and international treaties, and allocation of resources and budgets. And then the supplementary fundamental law that gave more additional authority to the Majlis, or the legislative body, and the people, in over appointment and dismissal of the cabinet members. The Shah actually reluctantly accepted the constitutional decree, but he had to accept it because of the fierceful or the wide mass support of the constitutional movement. Like tobacco protest and the constitutional restoration of the constitutional decree of 1906, they were some repeating themes, throughout until the eruption of the Iranian Revolution in the late 70s. So what happened during that period? It was the years leading up to the First World War. So France and Britain, managed to solve their their disputes over some colonies, and Russia actually joined later, and they formed this triple entente. And they had, to like Britain and Russia, they had to solve again, their disputes over Iran, and they had like these spheres of interest in Iran. They divided Iran, up between themselves, between Russia and Britain, and it was like an opportunity for the Shah in order to undertake his counter-revolution against the constitutionalists, against the proponents of the constitutional revolution, and he actually he suspended, the constitutional or the fundamental laws, and this ushered in a period of civil war and economic chaos. That led eventually to the removal of the Shah and the restoration of the constitution in 1909. But over like the next 2 years after the restoration of the constitution, the coalition had nothing in common but their opposition to the royal autocracy. So that's why it witnessed so many fractions between traditional or conservative elements and the Western and modern reformers. So like again, like it led to the occupation, the British and Russian occupation. The Shah continued to be like the ruler of the country, but like the foreign authority of the British authority and the Russian authorities, actually they had like de facto authority in order to run the country. So after the First World War, the Shah like had to continue to rule, but the foreign interest dominated the political scene, as I mentioned. So that was the situation until Reza Khan broke, this kind of weakness or deadlock in 1921 when he invaded Iran, and it took him like 4 years in order to establish, another dynasty or to consolidate his authority. So from 1926 till 1941, he actually established and consolidated the authority and introduced like another. He called like the tribal rebellion and introduced another dynasty, which was Pahlavi dynasty. That continued until the eruption of the Islamic Revolution, and he consolidated his power, and he made some reforms in order to have like a kind of rubber stamp parliament or majlis for his policies. He reasserted this pre-Islamic origins, and he depended heavily on the oil revenues, and it offered some external concessions in order to get some royal benefits. It was until like the Second World War, and although he claimed his neutrality, but Britain and Russia actually they believed that he was a sympathizer with the German forces. So that's why they had to invade Iran in August 1941. In order to save the dynasty, he had to abdicate or to allow his son to take over, to succeed him, in order to save the dynasty. And it was like until 1953 until another round of protest erupted, and the United States intervened. And actually the role of the United States during the Second World War, the United States actually increased its influence inside Iran, and it laid the groundwork for the United States to have kind of authority or power inside or influence over domestic policies in Iran. And actually it saved the Shah in 1953 against the outbreak of social unrest. So the Pahlavi dynasty sustained its power, and the Shah had to follow or to undertake some reform measures in order to legitimize his rule. But by opening up the political system, this led to the revival of some political activities. and the revival of some social and political opposition or political movement. The most prominent one was one reformist organization called Masses Party, founded in 1941. It was like a broad cross section. It was like it was composed of young Marxists that they managed to appeal to wide masses because they endorsed, some of the labor rights. So they defended, labor legislation, and they asked for more land reform measures in order to get support from the peasants, and they supported, some legal reforms for in order to allow for to give like more rights for women, and they asked for some legal reforms or some reforms in order to increase wages for low-level civil servants. So they managed to attract white sectors in society in order to advance their demands, and actually against the autocracy, the autocratic, the royal autocracy again, and the foreign domination. So the theme continued to play pivotal role in like igniting more popular opposition or protest until 1979. One prominent politician, Mossadegh, managed to form the National Front organization that managed to he drew together again traditional and modern elements, some traditional elements of merchants and ulama and modern middle classes, in order to form this National Front organization that asked for some radical economic measures against the foreign exploitation of the Iranian economic resources, or in order to put an end to these oil and economic concessions to foreigners. So the crucial or the breaking point happened when the Shah offered more concessions to the Anglo-Iranian oil company, while gaining like low percentage of the profits. So that's why they had to push for nationalization measures in order to get control over their own economic resources. So they managed to bring in the ulama as well, that they reused or redeployed this Islamic frame in order to attract more supporters from masses. So they framed it as like a serious Muslim or patriotic citizen. They had, to oppose or to challenge these economic concessions or the Shah economic policies. So that's how they managed to attract supporters to their to their program. And the Majlis actually took, these bold steps or measures of nationalization of the oil industry, and the appointment of Mossadegh as the prime minister. This actually triggered, a reaction from the British authority that imposed some economic sanctions and economic boycott in Iran that deteriorated even more the economic situation. So that's why it was very difficult for the National Front organization or Mossadegh to sustain their economic and social policies. So that's why it gave rise to re-emergence of the masses again. So the disintegration or the unraveling of the National Front gave rise to another political movements and re-emergence of traditional one, which was, the masses with this Marxist and left-leaning outlook. During that period, some disgruntled officers as well, they formed their secret committees in the army in order to conspire against the Shah or to overthrow the Shah. Only the foreign intervention, the United States, when they managed to arrange or to coordinate, some operations with the Iranian intelligence. So they managed to reconstitute the royal authority, and the Shah consolidated the royal dictatorship after 1953. So that was the case from 1953 until 1979. But during that period, Al-Khomeini emerged, and the same patterns of protest every now and then broke out in order to put claims or pressures on the Shia or the national the national government. So again, he adopted, this Western-oriented reforms and approached it even more Western interest. Now, like the United States, was welcomed on board, and he adopted, this two-party system in order to give the appearance of a democratic regime. But the economic hardship between 1960 and 1963 gave rise to another wave of social unrest. So what was important in this year, in 1963, it Al-Khomeini emerged as the central opposition figure in Iran. And he actually began to preach against the Shah and his corruption and corrupt economic policies, and the increasing influence of the United States in Iran, and the economic exploitation, and again selling one more issue, like with the selling the oil to Israel during that period. So the intelligence actually, or the Shah regime, had to arrest Al-Khomeini, and it did galvanize, anti-government protest. So that's why the Shah regime had to deport or to force Al-Khomeini into exile. He traveled firstly to Turkey, and then to Iraq, and then to France, where he actually led the revolution from there. So again, the oil bonanza and the increasing the prices of the oil in the 70s saved the Shah one more time, after the United States saved him in 1953. In the 70s, more oil revenues actually enabled him to mitigate, or the power of some political and social opposition forces. And he talked, what he called the white revolution, like bloodless, or a revolution without, any bloodshed. So he had to take like far-reaching social and economic programs in order to meet some of the economic and social demands of the population. Like land reform measures, or by limiting, the properties of the land for big landowners, and the distribution of lands, to small farmers, and like literacy programs and education and healthcare programs in rural areas, in order to enhance state control over villages and rural areas. And he gave some favorable legal reforms for women, especially for the family law. He actually didn't abolish polygamy, but the law stipulated that the acceptance of women was important before the man or the husband getting, another wife. And again, he made re-emphasized, this pre-Islamic legacy, in order to neutralize the predominant position of the Shia religious establishment in Iran. But during the 70s, more social forces started to emerge, and with new issues, especially from Marxist and Islamic leftists. So they actually took some or undertook some violent actions in Iran that pushed the regime in order to undertake some repressive and harsh repressive and suppressive measures as well. So the Shah had to abolish the two-party system and counted heavily on one party called the Resurgence Party. The main tasks were to glorify the Shah, or to have to assert the autonomy of the king or the monarchy from merchants and the religious establishment and the ulama. But again, the mismanagement of the oil revenues or economic resources led to like led to increase in the inflation rate, and he was not able to sustain, his social and economic programs that actually had negative effect on like labor force, that they had to migrate from rural areas to urban areas, and in order to join, the industrial sectors, but actually they didn't manage to get incorporated into the urban life. And like the continuity of the dependency on the West remained, one of the central element of the Shah regime that triggered even more political and social opposition. So the leading opposition voice during that period was actually secular and westernized professionals and students from secular universities. So they started to distribute manifestos or publish pamphlets in order to against the Shah and against his corrupt policies and the increasing influence of the Western forces. The process like culminated into two main organizations and associational representations of these different elements, traditional and secular and modern elements. So the freedom movement of Iran and the militant wing of ulama. These were the main two organizational forces or associations that actually led the country to the revolution, and they had kind of a struggle in the course of during like the revolutionary process, through the institutionalization process until the consolidation stage. So for the freedom movement of Iran, the main figure or the leading figure was Mehdi Bazargan. He founded the movement with this liberal orientation, but he didn't dismiss like Islamic component. According to the movement, it was kind of a compromise between modernization and Islamic elements was possible. So Islam was like a catalyst force and one vital component that could be integrated or incorporated into a modernization program. But the main the outlook was mainly liberal, and the movement attracted some Western and secular opposition, and they focused initially on some moderate reform measures, like restoration of the constitution of 1906. Ali Shariati was offered the ideological or philosophical foundation for the movement. Shariati, he was really kind of a political and religious thinker, that he gained education in Paris, and he adopted this kind of radical outlook and reformist doctrine that made it very difficult for him to secure any kind of educational position in Iran upon his return because of this radical outlook. But he used to lecture at religious halls, and he attracted his kind of reformist doctrine that brought together or blend the doctrine actually managed to blend together different ideological outlooks or different ideological elements like Marxism and Shiism, and revolutionary and patriotism. So he blended together different elements, but focused mainly on Shiism as an active faith. As a Shia believer, he could use this belief or put it in action in order to establish justice, or in order to resist the authoritarian regime or the tyranny of the royal autocracy. So he offered he was the intellectual foundation of the movement that managed to bring Islamist element or Shia element into this liberal orientation of the movement. But the militant wing of ulama, they didn't have like a common or a coherent stand. So some of them, like they believed they didn't have like any kind of political stand. They believed that there had been no place, for clergy in political activity. So they had to adopt, this neutral stand. And another element or another group, actually, the group found commonalities with the freedom movement of Iran by adopting, this moderate reforms like restoration of the constitution and trying to curb the extensive power of the Shah. And then the most like predominant group, or the radical and the militant one, they had these radical demands by asking for abolishing the royal autocracy and establishing Islamic State. So actually they appealed to the religious establishment in Iran, that they needed to assert its, the establishment needed to assert its predominant position in Iran and its autonomy from the state apparatuses. So again, Khomeini, like the one who led the protest in 1963, now forced into exile. But actually he used to give lectures, and his lectures actually recorded and the tapes smuggled into Iran and circulated widely. And the series of lectures, actually, his series of the lectures actually were published or organized into a book, published in 1971, and entitled "Government of the Islamic Jurist, حكومة ولاية الفقيه." It was actually like the code book or the handbook for of the revolution. So like giving lecture and disseminating, these ideas, he was very popular in Iran and a credible Islamic opposition figure. And as the revolution actually gained kind of momentum, his program attracted more supporters, because supporters to this Islamic State vision. So how he introduced himself, he actually managed to tap into, this kind of shared heritage of protest. First, this anti-imperialist stand or settlements that happened during the tobacco protest of 1891. And then by asking for eliminating, this increasing Western influence, so he appealed to these kind of heritage or this anti-imperial sentiments. And by appealing to abolishing the monarchy, the royal autocracy, he actually revived the call for the constitution, the same call for constitutional restoration or constitutional revolution of 1911. And then he himself actually offered, kind of resistance as a credible, he had kind of credential, opposition credential because of his resistance, to the Shah in 1963. So he emerged as credible Islamic oppositional figure, and he became a central figure of the revolution. So how things evolved, it took several waves or circles or cycles in order to lead to the entire collapse of the state. So in January 1978, the transformation happened when protesters took to the streets in Qom, and the regime, the Shah regime, brutally called or cracked down on the protesters, and the religious establishment tried to use, this event in order to mobilize more supporters. So using the 40-day mourning period in order to ask protesters in order to have this kind of memorial service in mosques. So they managed the rhythm of the political protest, and they managed to guide actually the political protest. So they used these 40 days in order to reorganize themselves, in order to indoctrinate people, in order to attract potential adherents. So another wave of protest happened in February 18th in major cities. Tabriz violence, and again the Shah harshly cracked down on them, and another round of memorial service, and then another wave of protest on March 29th, and then May 10th, using like the mosque in order to mobilize supporters or to mobilize protest against the Shah regime, and to keep like the revolutionary momentum. So during the summer in 1978, the Shah actually declared some harsh economic policies uh, that affected, he announced, some wage freezes, some general austerity programs that actually led to that increased the inflation and unemployment rate, and affected negatively the labor forces and the working forces, generally speaking, that immigrated from villages or rural areas to the urban areas. So the revolution or the revolutionary forces attracted one more segment from shantytown dwellers and labor forces. So because of the eruption again of another wave of protest, another wave of strikes, the Shah had to declare the martial law and to harshly suppress opposition and protests that actually erupted in Tehran. The turning point happened in what was called Black Friday in September 1978. So it was like a turning point, because laborers in some sensitive industries, they decided to go on strike, especially like oil refineries and oil fields. So they decided, to paralyze the entire country. And it was like Muharram in December, the coincidence happened like in December. It was like Muharram, where Shia they celebrated, they were commemorating, the memory of the death of Imam Hussein. So they needed, to mimic, the same sacrifice Imam Ali and Hussein made while because they died actually while resisting, the tyranny. So it offered, kind of motivation or incentive in order to galvanize, the wide protest against the Shah. So, and the situation, was culminated into a significant revolutionary moment or revolutionary protest that the army and the Shah regime were not able to suppress, this time. And with the culmination of the process or the escalation of the situation, some of the army officers defected, and some of them actually joined the protesters. So during that period, the Shah tried to offer some concessions by asking one moderate figure to get appointed as the prime minister from the freedom movement. But again, like Khomeini and the militant ulama, they refused to make any kind of concession, because for them it was too little, too late, and they had from the beginning, uncompromisable position. Let alone after this course of events and this number of casualties. So it was very difficult, and they depicted them as like traitors, or they betrayed the revolution if they accepted, any kind of concession offered by the Shah. So the Shah actually had to leave the country on the January 19th in 1979 in what was called an extended, vacation. Now he left the country, and he left, to Egypt, and Sadat welcomed him in Egypt, and that was marked the end of the Pahlavi dynasty. And then Khomeini returned to Iran, and some huge crowds actually welcomed him, and he again emerged as like a leading or a central figure of the revolution. But it was actually like a serious or a real revolutionary crisis or revolutionary moment, like it was like things were really chaotic and the outcomes were really uncertain. So different forces from across the political spectrum, like leftist, secular, and right wingers, like conservative elements of ulama, they started to struggle over power, and the main struggle was over the future orientation of the Iranian society. So for the some of the like the freedom movement, for example, and the proponents of moderate reforms and secular reforms, they asked for constitutional regime with kind of moderate reforms and secular and liberal orientation. And Khomeini and militant or radical ulama, the conservative element, they were, or Khomeini basically, he was true to his word by like like his adherence to this establishment of Islamic State. So he needed to establish, this kind of Islamic theocracy, and he actually did. He institutionalized, this, or like laid the groundwork for the establishment of this Islamic State by establishing four main institutions or institutional settings in order to assert the dominance of the ulama, or the militant wing of the ulama. So firstly, the Council of the Islamic Republic. Um, the council took on some legislative and administrative duties, and actually it appeared as like the most prominent institution that limited the scope of the government. Um, so actually they tried to offer kind of collaboration between before establishing, these kind of Islamic institutions. So the Bazargan, actually from the freedom movement, got appointed as the prime minister, and that's why they had to deliberate about, or the future orientation of the Iranian society. So the struggle between, like, the main forces that took part in the revolution became like much more obvious, in the process of consolidating or institutionalizing the revolution, and then consolidating, these institutions. So he was like, in charge of the government, but the institutional arrangements El Khomeini tried to establish, or he already established, actually eroded the or limited the scope of the government. And the Council of Islamic Republic was subject, or like placed, El Khomeini placed, the council under his own guidance, and he had like the authority to issue decrees and laws, and he had the council enjoy, this veto power or veto authority in order to postpone the proposals of by the government, that led eventually to the resignation of the Bazargan in 1979. So it was like a total collapse of the state apparatuses or state organization, and that's why El Khomeini, what the institutional configuration, El Khomeini established, it gained over time. It gained kind of authority over any other, like, institutional proposals. And then the Revolutionary Guards, it was like, non-regular. It was kind of distinct from the regular military or armed forces, and it was like composed of mainly from young people from urban centers, that they were the guards, were deployed against the secular opposition in order to assure or enhance the dominant position of the Khomeini coalitions. And then the Revolutionary Corps that actually passed sentences on ex-officials and ordered executions of some members of the intelligence apparatuses and from the oppositional forces. And then the Islamic Republic Party, IRP, it was like a party emerged or initially in order to mobilize, wide or social supporters for the Khomeini coalition, and to discredit, the secular component of the freedom movement, and especially, including some elements that they had this Western education or Western outlook actually discredited the movement, and it gave and made Khomeini movement or Khomeini institutions, made them appeal to wide masses. And then the 19 in March 1975, Khomeini had a referendum, and then the majority approved, the removal of the monarch and the establishment or the replacement with the Islamic Republic. And here, where the conflict and the opposition, erupted again over the disputed over, the interpretation of this Islamic Republic thing. And the main site, for this struggle or this political conflict was like the process of the constitution writing, or the composition of the assembly of experts that was in charge of writing or drafting the new constitution. So now the freedom movement in charge of the government, but the composition or the majority of the assembly, actually the ulama dominated the majority of the assembly. And Khomeini himself made clear that the new constitution had to adopt, the Islamic 100%, Islamic law or Islamic Sharia. So, like the initial draft of the constitution endorsed proposed by the government, mainly from the freedom movement. The constitution, the draft endorsed, this principle of Islamic Sharia or Islamic law. But it didn't actually give any kind of independent authority or independent role to the religious establishment. But actually, because of the ulama dominated the assembly, so the completely altered the government draft, and they actually gave dominant and independent position to the ulama. So what the constitution did, it created this kind of competing power centers by creating different elected officials or elected bodies, and offering or granting some or extensive authority or power to non-elected officials or non-elected bodies, especially maintained or preserved for the religious establishment. So actually, it enabled the constitution enabled the elections of the president, the election of one single national assembly or majlis, and municipal or local councils as well. So it allowed for some electoral politics that enabled the establishment of some elected bodies or officials. But at the same time, it granted wide authority to non-elected officials by establishing the Council of Guardians. So the council actually had to screen or to approve, the candidate for presidency and the candidates for the majlis or the legislative authority, and even for the local councils. So Khomeini himself was entrusted with the responsibility of serving as the supreme Islamic jurist, and the Council of Guardians, dominated by the ulama and Khomeini, they were in charge of appointing, or the supreme Islamist jurist actually was in charge of appointing half of the the members of the Council of Guardians, and even like the mens the head of the Revolutionary Guards and the armed forces and the military establishment as well. So it gave like non-elected official, like the supreme Islamic jurist. It gave like extra constitutional authority over elected authorities or elected officials. He put it up. The constitution was like put up for a referendum in late 1979, and it was like approved by the population, and this actually enabled the election of the first president in Iran in 1980. He like the Abu al-Hassan Bani Sadr gained the majority, not because of his personality, but he had like some bonds with the Khomeini himself, the Khomeini himself. So that's why he gained kind of he won the elections with a great majority. But during that period, still like the struggle for power between different social forces, especially secular elements or secular forces and ulama, like still like the situation was like unstable, and again like some international challenges as well because of this ideological force of the Islamic Revolution triggered anti-Western feeling or sentiment that led to like the case of when some Iranian actually kidnapped some officials from the U.S. embassy. This actually like deteriorated the relationship between Iran and the United States. So it was very difficult for the new president to navigate through these challenges. And Khomeini himself tried to isolate him. That eventually led to his impeachment in I think 1 year after the elections. So the revolution actually had devoured its prime minister and the president that actually participated in the revolution, Bazargan and Bani Sadr. So like he didn't, like al-Khomeini didn't intend to establish like personal dictatorship. So that's why he did care about establishing these kind of institutions in order to allow for in order to consolidate to institutionalize the revolution and to consolidate the revolution to persist through time after his death. And that was what was actually happened. But it was like struggle for power between different ideological forces that eventually led to the predominant position of the ulama or the religious establishment that actually tried to maintain its autonomous and predominant position since the Safavid or empire or dynasty. So after eroding or eliminating any threat came from secular elements, now the new threat came from the militant Islamic left, from a group called Mujahidi Khalq that actually tried to they committed some of the suicide bombing and some violent actions against some communication and targets in Iran in 1981. So that's why the Khomeini regime or the state had to impose kind of ideological conformity. It did shut down all the universities or in order to undergo this Islamization process, to monitor closely to what extent the civil servants and university professors and even the students admitted to the university didn't have any previous record, leftist or secular record, in order to impose this kind of ideological hegemony of the Islamic Revolution. And after undergoing through this Islamization process, the universities were reopened in 1981, and actually the main or the common theme was like, the decreasing the number of or the percentage of enrollment rate, especially between among women. And he imposed, harsh laws on women, and they had, this patriarchal interpretation of the Quran or the religion. So that's why they imposed, kind of dress code, and prevented women in the beginning from entering some professions or some universities, because they had like their own perception about the role of women in private life against, public affairs. So they imposed, this dress code is like they imposed mainly hijab on women, and the many kind of, family, the many kind of privileges they gained, before, during the Pahlavi dynasty. Actually, the Khomeini state, or the state, after the revolution, eliminated, these kind of previously gained concessions. Um, Islamization, or economic policies, or Islamization of economy was not, that rapid as Islamization of society. So because of Khomeini, and ulama had to get rid of, their opponents or their oppositions. So they had to, they didn't have time, or didn't have effort to invest in the economic domain. Although they took, some measures, some nationalization measures or redistribution measures, but they didn't have any coherent economic outlook, or how to establish, their Islamic vision of justice, for example. And what made, the situation even worse was the outbreak of the war with Iraq, that actually added more economic difficulties on the state. But like by the end of the 80s, the Khomeini managed to consolidate, to establish and consolidate the revolution. He was kind of charismatic and the central figure of the revolution, but he created, these institutional foundation that persisted, after his death, when he actually disappeared from the political scene in 1889. But before that, he decided to dissolve the party, Islamic Revolutionary Party, because the party actually did, the main target or the main mission, that was like, establishing a social base for the revolution. But the main target was creating kind of competing centers of power that would prohibit, one center from taking over the other one, or from establishing its own dominance over the other centers or other institutions. So he actually led the revolution, institutionalized the revolution, relegating all, or eliminating, all the oppositional forces, and established, the theocratic state after a total dismantling of the Pahlavi dynasties in Iran. And obviously it's like persisted through time, and the ulama, or the Walayat al-Faqih, continued to rule Iran, and it continued to have predominance over elected officials, even with the emergence of some reformists, like led by Khatami, for example. But it was like the central element, or the central figure was like, the rule of jurist, in the Islamic Republic of Iran. So next lecture we will talk more about, different forms of Islamism, or the different, manifestation of political Islam in the region, and different forms of the Islamic revival, and how, like, this the Iranian Revolution actually triggered, or the idea of like exporting, the Islamic Revolution intensified, this struggle or this conflict between Sunni and Shia, and it triggered, triggered or inspired some other, movements from like the Sunni counterparts. So that will be the topic of Thursday's lecture. Bye.